All right, let's move on to stars. We've got Dr. Dennis Nesdoly and Dr. J.N. Armstrong. Dennis and I were residents together many, many years ago in Calgary. In fact, he was my chief resident, and neither of us survived that traumatic experience. So we haven't talked to each other since then until today. He's practiced emergency medicine in Calgary for over 30 years and is currently clinical assistant professor at University of Calgary and works in the Department of Emergency Medicine. And more importantly for today is the associate chief medical officer at STARS. And he provides medical oversight for the 6 operational bases that provide critical care transport across 4 provincial regions. Dr. J.N. Armstrong is consultant anesthesiologist, Department of Anesthesia in the Calgary region, associate professor of anesthesia at the Cummings School of Medicine, and he took on the role of CMO, Chief Medical Officer for STARS in 2013, and then currently, as of 2018, is also the Chief Aviation Officer. In this role, he's responsible for both aviation and the delivery of medical care in the province. So, take it away, guys.
There's a clicker. Clicker. Voice. Check. Font here, John. Look at that. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks, John. Now that we're starting late, you want me to make up for the time? Reverse? Yeah. Great to be here. And as you heard Steve mentioned a few times, the collegiality that we've had with, thank you, Dr. Powell's inspiration to have the first forum a few years ago to continue that exchange of information. We've gleaned a lot of pearls from everyone here, so it's great to be here. Brief amount of time. I know you said 14 minutes and 7 minutes. So we got 21 minutes, I know. So I'll do my best. You might have a seizure with some of the slides. But what we have to explain a little bit, we're a bit more, we're flexible, nimble. We've had a change of plans in the last few days to address the 4 subjects that we wanted to talk about. I actually polled our base medical directors, what do they think, not what I think we should share here. And of that short list, I distilled it down to 4. Safety framework, communication, major incident that we reviewed, and fleet renewal. So we're going to try to do that in 19.5 minutes. Okay, Jay? You on for that? Okay. This must go forward like that. Ooh, it sparkles. I didn't know that. Okay. First thing is, back in Orange time, Toronto, I introduced the collaborative project that we got an invitation to be part of with the safety framework. And then in Halifax, we just touched on it, but we finished it last April. I wanted to touch base, 30-second background about all the safety gurus that some of you probably read about, how things have changed. My plaid pants are coming back in vogue for sure. We got, the age of technology all the way through to human factors, blaming the human and blaming the machine, blaming the interface. Now it's the complex adaptive system, very conceptual, but it might have some relevance to our complicated environment. And you've heard the term safety 1, what goes wrong, now safety 2, what are all the good things that go right, and now maybe safety 3 is recovery from error, resiliency. And so it's not about dominoes, the cheese thing, that sell-by date's done, and then the human-machine interface is what we do in our organization industry, and is now evolved to a lot of complexity. You're not going to be able to predict, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a minute. So that is 1.5 to 3 ton hippo. I've used this is a lot of Photoshop with all kinds of photo credits later on the bottom, but the having your daughter or son ride a hippo is not a good thing, right? Because that's the most aggressive animal in the world based on size and attitude, and I work with some people like that. Anyways, so if you have a duct tape helmet, steel-toed child, that's the least risk. So one of my colleagues in the bottom right, Shannon, talked about the empty hanger. That's 0 risk. We don't do that. We're going to do scene calls. We're going to accept some risk and manage it. And that, I think, is Surrey, BC, isn't it, John? The brand new emergency department. Yeah, it's open. Well, without it open, that's low risk because there's no patients there. We're not going to do that either. We do the scene, the trauma bay 1. And so it's about managing risk, as you know. And I've overused this slide so many times, but I just want to say that we're not exactly like aviation. Sorry, Jan, we're not. Igor Sikorsky and Trefination in Machu Picchu, we've come a long ways to rooftop helipads with the AW139 night vision goggles everyone's using now. Amazing technology. But there's still communication errors. Tenerife, whoops, and potassium dialysis in a foothills ICU. There's still human errors. So what can we learn from these high reliability organizations. Some things, but it's not a perfect extrapolation. And I brought this up before, but we just had a few months ago some workshops with our aviation colleagues, and they were appalled that we would accept the lack of reliability with our biomedical equipment. Our smart pumps, so to call, troubleshooting them, the transport ventilators, the bioparameter monitors that break down almost unpredictably, they would not tolerate that. They have twin engines that are extremely reliable, and I think the difference psychologically undercurrent is if we have a flawed piece of equipment, the patient suffers, but if they have a engine failure, there's 5 people that hit the terrain. So maybe there's an undercurrent of what's the risk and the consequence of the risk. So I'm going to skip ahead just to focus on the second thing of the collaborative project. Excuse me. We joined 6 other healthcare organizations. This year there's a second cohort doing it right now with Canadian Patient Safety Institute, and it's leading off a document from 2013, Dr. Charles Vincent and a couple of other authors who tried to put together the science of safety and practical applications of it. And basically we had 3 learning sessions at Toronto, 2 days each, a team of 4 of us, monthly facilitated webinars, and then they came to visit us, and we tried to look at where we can improve safety, not past harm, rearview mirror stuff, which we're all good at, but right now in the moment and anticipating, predicting. And we had some challenges. I'm going to skip through this. We're pretty good at past harm. Most of us are. Reliability, standardization, doing audits. Are we compliant? We have reporting systems. Only 15% of our emissions lead to reports. That sucks, but that's pretty good. I mean, 5% in a hospital system. We're still finding other ones when we do retrospective audits, so not everything gets reported. And then we have, I mentioned one of our seasoned air medical crew going to all the bases as a interbase sort of reliability. Not a police, but looking for drift between bases as far as actual real frontline practice. That's been an asset. Sensitivity operations, this is a dramatic example where we have a tail rotor, drive shaft, maintenance detected after 31 hours of being used. Those are some loose bolts and screws. Close call. A non-punitive systems review led to a number of significant changes, but that's exactly what duty, daily inspections would pick up as on a regular scheduled basis, things that could go wrong but are caught and recovered from. And lastly, we have a lot of experience with simulation, high fidelity and in vitro, in situ, and we're working a bit more on teamwork modular skills, but we haven't introduced patient perspective, and that's what's missing in our organization. What is the patient experience? And you've probably all seen Dr. Brazil in Australia talk about putting an actor in the sim and seeing what they think, because we haven't done that yet, but we're looking at that. And our transport physician forum is amazing, powerful. Others can testify, provide testimony to this, where there's a complex case where feces hits the fan, and then they send out an invitation to all their transport physician colleagues, how would you have done this? And it's an amazing, powerful forum of learning and trying to pass on to the junior transport docs and cases that aren't very common. So the good, bad, and ugly. Well, we learned in a collaborative project we have a pretty good approach to past harm. We're looking at standardization in both aviation and clinical, a little bit better than we used to. But we had a dramatic, I'm going to say catastrophic failure when I think it was Canadian Patient Safety Institute Safety Week, where we thought we'd ask, what's your best workaround? We'd love to know. And you've heard this before maybe. We thought that was a cool thing to ask because we know people don't do what is on the policy book. And we got shut down very appropriately by our aviation colleagues saying, don't ever ask what a deviation is in a federally regulated Transport Canada environment because everyone complies, right? And we said, well, no, and then, but I lost that one. We all, so it's a time of standardization. So we changed our gears and said, okay, we'll throw up this video vignette, and that's Sarah Painter from Winnipeg Base, who had a self-identified 10-time insulin medication error during a calcium channel blocker overdose. She detected, she recovered from, the patient's okay, but then she then does a testimonial video and then does a systems review of all the erratically programmed infusion pumps in that province and standardize them all. Very cool. It's one example of integrating and learning. And so to make fun of whoever reads Sidney Decker, the Michael Moore of safety, he talks about some guy in mining, I think it was Australia again, I'm going to point at Australia a lot, drops the shampoo bottle on his toe in the shower here, fractures his toe, and he gets reprimanded because they're not wearing steel-toe boots in the shower. So they all wear steel-toe boots and they all get fungal infections. True. Now, we're not that bad in aviation yet. Standardization at all costs does have a cost, is lack of autonomy, morale goes down, individual judgment. So that's why I made fun with the steel-toed flip-flops, and they're for you, John. You can have those. Yeah. Okay, quick second one. This week, thanks for bringing that up, communication. It's this week. I want to take 30 seconds to talk about, remember when they blew up your hospital? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. That still hurts. Yeah, 1998. Well, just before the implosion of the Calgary General, we had one Bow Valley Center trauma hotline, Southern Alberta, 1-800-661-1700. Yes, I still remember it, and it's still there, actually. And a physician, we would answer it in emerge. Rural doc would say, someone's been hit by a tractor, and it was one-to-one call, and we arranged a helicopter. Then a disaster happened, traumatic amputation, unpreventable death. And industry said, well, we have some money to make communication better. Here, have some money. And we started with a couple computers, some laminated maps on the wall, and a couple phone callers. And then it generated to an emergency link center that now does like 12,000 requests a year. Online medical control, I don't know how many years that's been going. 5 or 6 years now, 24/7 physicians online control for EMS, and that's like 26 of those a day. We have 8 to 10 missions a day now. Rapid North-South, you can read the acronym, I don't have time, for North and South to do referral, inter-facility movement. And then, are you going to talk about this, Mark? Yeah. And a little bit. Logis. Now, just a couple months ago, on top of that, we've come a long ways, baby. We have communication where there's, I'm going to call machine learning. Is that the right word? Where the computer does recurrent learning of referral data, ground ambulance, fixed wing, rotary patients, and frees up the human being for the EMS 911 time sensitive calls, and the computer is doing all the rest that right now are sucking up human beings' time. And lastly, it was a year ago this weekend, April 6, 2018. This is John Griffiths, who was on that night at our Link Center. And I just wanted to talk about this for a few seconds of what we learned from an event that has been reformatted. I led a team of 4 of us to look at this from an internal point of view. And the event had 30 patients, a 53% fatality rate, involved 5 hospitals, 325 people that we touched base with, and 12 aircraft, rotary and fixed wing, and it went over about, well, in our 9 to 10 hours, more than 10 ambulances. And everyone knows the event. I won't get into details, but it took us 6 months to do the report. We did about 50-some one-on-one interviews, Doug and I, Dr. Martin and I, and listened to about 12 hours of audio recordings. And you'll probably, it was quite impressive what we learned, how this unpredictable event brought agencies and facilities together for those hours. And so like at 10 to 5 it happened. By 18:30 we knew there was 15 critically ill patients. Both helicopters, Saskatchewan and Regina, went. Fixed wing were mobilized. There was 8 ambulances at the scene that dispersed the equidistant hospitals, Tisdale, Nipawin. And yes, communication was a fog. We found that out. And basically we returned back with the Saskatoon helicopter for another patient. Grand Prairie and Medicine Hat, Alberta-based fixed wing, came in with blood products and other crew. Regina used their backup helicopter with another set of crew. And by 4:28 that morning, 15 critically ill patients had had their interventions done and safely transported to Saskatoon Trauma Center. We learned a lot, and it could be better. But we're planning, after the recommendation owners are working on it this month, the 7 themes that we extracted from an internal operations point of view. We're going to publish in this open access template that a Norwegian Air Ambulance has developed to share, as in this area, major incidents, common terminology, common learnings. They have like earthquakes and tunnel explosions, European-based. There hasn't been any from North America yet, but we hope to publish that. And lastly, introduce my friend in 2 seconds. Come on, slowly up. We started with a BK, and what is that? Canvas, military-style litter, and throw-on bags, and then standardized interior. And then we had the Australian again, God, Australian heli mods prototype, and then an aerolite. So reason that I'm not going to talk about this is because he's the aviation chief officer and the chief medical officer. And there's one more reason you have to slowly come up here. Is this is Dr. J.N. Armstrong's last landing, recorded landing, in a helicopter. Yes, he's flying that. Look at that. Amazing. And that's a big crosswind. Anyways, this man has ability to talk about critical care medicine and landing, fixed wing and rotary. So I'm not worthy of being up here anymore. So aircraft renewal. Aircraft renewal.
Well, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, a little overstated, but actually that was my last flight, and it was filmed. But the fun part about that was that you didn't see was the water cannon. Apparently, the members, my colleagues at the Stars Edmonton base, managed to organize with Edmonton Fire to do that. So yeah, so very emotional, but that's not why I'm up here actually. Very quickly, Dennis has used most of the time, and by the way, despite the introduction, I did catch the comment about working with a hippo. I don't know if they take that personally or not. But I want to talk quickly about our fleet renewal and what's happened with that. And interestingly enough, there's been a significant evolution in this process since these slides were submitted. So I think, as most people know, we're underway with a fleet renewal, fleet implementation project. It's now implementation, less renewal. Our BKs, the BK117s, our youngest platform is, approaching 30 years of age. We knew we had to replace them. We had done an internal audit, realized that by 2023 we wouldn't probably be able to do 24/7 operations. So a number of years ago we initiated the renewal project. I ended up selecting the H145T2. It's not new news. That's a picture of it. Those are not our colors. Actually, our colors are embargoed for the moment until we have a big release next week. Dennis got himself in trouble by using a slide earlier than he should have, but yeah, X-nay on that. So that was the picture of the 145. We had a number of principles that we wanted to follow to replace the fleet. It had to be safe, reliable. That's motherhood and apple pie. The big things, though, that we wanted to have was a single type, standardized platform across all the bases. Had to be new technology, of course, because we're looking at an operational life of 30 years or thereabouts. Had to be at least consistent or better than the BK performance in terms of speed and range. So all part of the equation. We did some work. Dave did a lot of work around the two-patient configuration, and we realized that over our period of time, less than 0.8% of our missions were two-patient, and even those were somewhat subjective, so that did not become a big part of the decision-making. And the other point that we looked at hard was, and that influenced the outcome, is the ability to airway manage in the air. And I don't mean just being able to intubate, but also bag valve mask, or even just splint open an airway. That was critical, so we had to have the right seat access for that. We put all that together in a matrix. This one's the medical requirements. You don't need to worry about the detail. Did the same thing for the aviation requirements, including such things as NVG compatible, 4-axis autopilot, all the terrain warning, synthetic vision, the new technology to keep us safe. Put all that in a matrix. Put out an RFP. Had replies by a number of airframe manufacturers. We applied a scoring to that, and then came up with the 145. So this is some of the basic statistics. A little faster than the BK, a little slower than the 139. It has a bit of a longer range than the BK, 295 kilometers. I think, as we all know, Transport Canada and their H1 heliport and Cat A performance interpretations are problematic for all of us. And so this aircraft had to be able to operate Cat A from the H1 heliports that we go into. And Calgary with this altitude, Grand Prairie with the same altitude, could have been a bit of a challenge, but it meets those requirements, at least as presented by the manufacturer. 4-axis autopilot, synthetic vision, I've already talked about. Very quickly, it looks like the BK, and in many ways it is. In fact, it has the same type certificate. It's the BK117 D2. instead of the B2 models that we had. But it's a significant change. The cabin's a bit wider, a bit longer. The seats on the side actually swivel. They'll go forward, aft, sideways, which is much more effective and gives room. That's a slide of the 2-patient load. This will have a bridge, and on the bridge we'll have the ventilators, pumps, and everything else. So a bit different than the BK, but similar to the 139 that we have. This is a picture of the oxygen. Of course, at STARS, we're a little twitchy about oxygen, and I think all operators need to be, actually, because it is a very limited consumable, and depending on your mission, you need to be careful. So and plus, during the introduction of the 139, we really ran afoul of Transport Canada. They were very unhappy with having high-pressure O2 lines running underneath the floor in a medical cabin. And took us a long time to certify that. The aircraft, despite being in our possession, was down for months before we get it certified. So we were very concerned about that. I'm happy to say that the whole system has now been certified as of about a month ago. Probably double the capacity of O2, Dave, 4,300 liters in the aircraft tank. So, very extended range. Part of the problem is using high flow O2 for oxygenation for patients now, and BiPAP becomes an issue. So, we'll be able to extend the mission with that. And then some portable bottles there, and just a higher level picture. So that was the slide deck that I presented, and relatively straightforward, and I can certainly answer any questions around that. But as Homer said in the taxiway over, boy, I'd like to hear about your manna from heaven. And I suspect this will be a big part of the conversation. Maybe not at this discussion, but I'm certainly happy to answer questions anytime during the next couple of days. But there's a couple old sayings. Be careful what you wish for, and may you live in interesting times. Because about 3 weeks ago, in the course of 4 days, we basically received funding from both the Alberta provincial government and the federal government for 6 of our helicopters for a fleet renewal. Combine that with the promise from Saskatchewan already and some private investment, and a process that we thought was going to take a decade, and we had planned for a decade to do, it's not done, but it's virtually changed overnight. So in the federal budget, the federal government announced funding for 5 helicopters, and that happened on a Tuesday. The Saturday before that, the provincial government notified us that they were funding 1. That money's in the bank. The federal government money we're expecting down the road, hopefully. There's no issues with that. But literally, that happened. We've had briefing notes, presentations, everything as far back as 2013. Thursday evening, the CEO gets a phone call from both the provincial government and federal government, very independently. We're going to be in Calgary on Saturday to present you a check. The Fed said you need to be in Ottawa on Tuesday for a pre-budgetary meeting. We had no idea what that meant, what was coming, or anything else. And then the announcements followed. And while we're thrilled, of course, who wouldn't be? Funding is always an issue, and I know we all have that. We all have different funding models, and but we all have our challenges in terms of being able to both access money for capital and operating. So what's happened now is, of course, a good part of our fleet renewal project, fleet implementation, is done. The biggest thing that kept me up at night worrying about how we're going to fund this. But now we have to actually operationalize it. And then there's a big scramble, happened over a course of a week, because the federal government wanted information on how quickly you get the asset, when it will be operational, how many people do you fly, how many of them are Indigenous, how many are female, male, what's the provincial ratio. Kind of done all after the fact. So we were really scrambling. We have a board meeting on Wednesday, and that board meeting now has a complete pivot and shift from more usual activities to, well, what does this mean for us, and what do we do next? And when I say be careful what you wish for, while we have received this as great news, it's not perfectly well received everywhere across the country, because of course private operators think that that's an unfair platform or unfair advantage. There's also concerns that, and we're starting to feel this now. Oh well, you guys have your helicopter, you got all this money now. You don't need us to to either participate from AHS, Alberta Health Services, for example, to the same level, or our donors in philanthropy will be a big challenge. So the board meeting now will be a huge shift in that direction about what are the challenges from this and how do we address them. So that is a summary, I think, of the helicopter and also the very recent developments. And I won't take up any more time, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions around all that to the best of my ability later on. Thank you.